Welcome to Crossroad Connection. We're speaking out for those left unheard. My name is David Scheringa, the host of the program, and I'm the president of Crossroad Bible Institute. I think most of our regular viewers know that Crossroad Bible Institute not only goes into prisons all across America, but around the world, and increasingly becoming an international force, an international operation with our niche in the Great Commission. And so to give you more information on that, I'd like to introduce to you two very important people who are running the international program. And so we have here Sandra Chang, and we have Jacob Busker. Now, Sandra, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Sandra is the Spanish and Latin American coordinator. And also doing some translation and stuff for us, right? And Jacob, you are the international coordinator. We've just added you on recently because God has been blessing this ministry so much. And of course, there's lots of other staff people who are involved, but you two are the main coordinators. So I thought it'd be good for our listeners our viewers to meet you and just hear a little bit more about what what you're involved with. So you've been here the longest, and now you were the international coordinator, but now you've focused in on Latin America, and of course that's my goal. Is I think we need a coordinator, a director for every continent, because we have satellite campuses on every continent in the world, and we hope to see that only increase. But why don't you just give the viewers just a little bit of your background and so forth, and why this interests you?
Well, my name is Sandra. I am from Peru. I came to Grand Rapids, Michigan in 2008 to study at Calvin College. I lived in Buenos Aires, Argentina for about 10 years. My dad is Chinese. In 2011, I got married, and I've been working in CVI since 2013. And I really enjoy working, especially with the Spanish-speaking countries at the Crossroad Bible Institute, because I think I have a better connection with them for my background. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, and it's been great. You've done a little bit of traveling for us so far. I think you were down in Miami meeting with instructors. We have about 3,000 Spanish-speaking students right here in the United States. Most of them, I think, in detention centers. Is that correct?
Right. Many of them are in immigration centers, so they are here for a little bit and then they get deported back to their country of origin. And I was in Miami last December of 2013, visiting with the instructors there, doing an instructor seminar because we have a group of 50 instructors.
How many?
50.
50?
Yeah, they are just in Miami, and they absolutely love the ministry there.
Yeah, no, that's a great bunch of folks down there, and we have a great need for Spanish instructors. But we're going to come back to that, to this whole thing, because I want to give Jacob a chance here to be introduced. But welcome to the program, Jacob.
Thank you.
And what's your interest in the international ministry of Crossroad Bible Institute? Why were you drawn to it?
The ability to work with international cultures, international people, and to use the Christian ministry is a blessing in itself. And so in working with many of these individuals who have many different backgrounds, it is such a pleasure to work with them on a day-to-day basis in developing CBI's program and implementing it all around the world, utilizing their skills that they're familiar with, that they're immersed in with their own culture, and then trying to work and seek a balance. And it's a challenge, but a wonderful challenge at that.
Yeah, I think I recall when you were in the interview process, just the idea of having a global impact, being in contact with various different cultures and stuff is something that was close to your heart.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the Crossroad implementing the program. 15 years ago, when I came here, I had a vision for having Crossroad in many countries because we were getting lessons in from 50 or 60 countries every year, but they were coming to Grand Rapids. And then from Grand Rapids, we'd send them out across the country to instructors, because we have instructors in every state and province. And then those instructors had to send them back to those other countries. But what I saw immediately is that the program was, the discipleship program was taking like 3 times as long as people in this country, you know. So I had a vision for the idea that could we start little CBIs around the world, which would, number one, allow the courses to be finished more efficiently and quickly, but even just as importantly, allow Christians, the church, to disciple the prisoners in their own country rather than have Americans disciple them. That's the church's job there, and it's our job here. What's been your experience with that? That's what's been happening, right? And tell us what you've been seeing out there.
Well, it comes to mind the work that Byron Aguilar is doing in Guatemala, you know, and all the different countries in Latin America. But I think he's especially close to what you are describing, that, you know, there is a urgent need of instructors there, and the church is so willing to contribute and train these people, and not only disciple them, but disciple them in their own language, you know. So it's just been wonderful, and it's been difficult at the same time, but it's possible.
So the church in Latin America is doing the same thing we're doing. What are you seeing in Africa, Jacob? Because we're all over Africa.
Well said. I think what's great about these satellite campuses, especially in Africa, is the community involvement. And often it grabs a more holistic approach. And what I mean by that is we see more directors in Africa working directly with prisoners, discipling them, partnering with them, but also providing basic necessities for them, whether that's water,
Yep, I wanted to get
electricity, medical supplies, if they're able to have
blankets,
access to
clothes.
Exactly.
Right.
So while that's not something that Headquarters USA usually works with inside or domestically, it's something that is very important in reaching out to many of these campuses in Africa.
Yeah, that's what I've often people say, well, do you go into the prisons? And I says, well, we don't have to in the Western countries, like in CBI Australia, CBI Canada, New Zealand, United States, because number one, the mail system is very efficient.
Wonderful.
It's wonderful.
Yes.
And then therefore we're not limited to prisons that are close by an instructor. We can handle any instructor in the West and any prisoner in the West, but also because in the West the basic necessities are taken care of. The church doesn't have to bring them food or clothing or medical things. But in the developing world, which you deal with in Latin America, which you deal with in Africa, for example, they can't reach as extensively as we do in the West because the mail system is insufficient and expensive and unreliable, but also because the government, the prisons there, do not provide them the daily necessities. So it would be quite hypocritical to provide a Bible study, but not for them not to have food to eat, right?
Exactly.
And so it's the same discipleship experience, but they need to hand deliver those lessons, and they need to provide them. Now tell me if this is true or not. But my understanding is, talking with international directors, and this is why our ministry has been expanding so quickly around the world, is that even in the developing world, they say, we can share our food, we can share our medical, we can share our blankets and our food and all that, but we need help in discipling them. Have you heard that?
Yeah, as I was thinking about that, I'm thinking about how directors may fundraise for blankets, water, and etc. But the impact that the Bible studies have, it's huge. They don't have materials like the CVI courses that students can do
Systematically get through God's Word.
Right. So they don't have that, but yet they can, however, they can find materials and supplies to give to the students. And another service that they provide, and I think it's in Colombia and Kenya, those are the most notable ones, is the reentry assistance. You know, once they are done, once they are out of prison, Jefferson in Kenya makes sure to follow up with the students.
Right.
And Antonio in Colombia does the same thing.
That's a very good point. That we too here in the States, we're very concerned about reentry. So that's why, but because we're dealing with tens of thousands of students all over the country, we don't try to reinvent the wheel because we work with 1,500 reentry agencies to get them jobs and housing, but they don't have 1,500 reentry agencies in the developing world. They have to be the reentry agency.
Exactly.
Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, and they have to be very organized and very thorough in terms of identifying, the students that are going to be out of prison soon and how to get in touch with them and what kind of help are they going to need once they're out. Because it's just like here, many of these students don't have the opportunities to get a job because they've been in prison for a while.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And there's
I want to come back. I
stigma.
want to come back to that too about that matter of jobs and stuff like that and what's going on in Papua New Guinea. But before we take the break, let's go to Southeast Asia and Paul Tan. Isn't he doing something right now in Cambodia to help returning citizens?
Yes. He and our director there are working together to, as a part of this holistic approach, provide reentry assistance, provide opportunities that allow students to gain reentry and feel comfortable inside their community after they have been released, whether that's a job, whether that's a place to stay until they find a job, whether that's meeting their families that they have been separated from. And while this is in the works, we're still seeing exactly the details of how this is going to be implemented, what's a good method to work with both the students, the community, as well as the directors.
Now, didn't he start some business or something like that?
Yeah, a catering service.
Yes.
A catering service to provide jobs for them, and he's
Yes.
working in halfway houses in Cambodia and so forth to help these people out. Well, we're going to take a break here, but after the break, I just want to talk about why is it that the program just seems to work everywhere. I mean, almost counterintuitive because you hear so much today about cultural uniqueness, but it seems like the needs of prisoners and returning citizens seem to be the same all around the world. We'll be right back after this.
Stay connected to what's happening at Crossroad Bible Institute with Crossroad Network News. This free magazine is designed to keep you informed and inspired about what Christ Church is doing in prisons and jails. If you'd like a free subscription to Crossroad Network News, fill out the form online by visiting us at cbi.fm.
Welcome back to Crossroad Connection. We got a special show for you today. My name is David Scheringa, and I have in the studio with me Jacob Busker and Sandra Chang. Sandra is the Spanish and Latin American coordinator, and Jacob is the international coordinator. And so we've been talking about a whole lot of things, especially how actually similar the program is everywhere. And we've noticed that when it comes to the developing world, it's a more intensive approach, so they can't reach as many because the needs are much greater that they need to meet. But let's talk about that. You started to touch on that. Why is the program so successful no matter where we go? I mean, we have it right. We have it in Spanish, in English. We have it in Mandarin.
Correct.
We're just about ready to release it in Swahili. And it's also, what's that language in Indonesia?
Bahasa.
Bahasa. It's going to be in that. Okay, so who wants to start? Why is the program that was started 30 years ago by a handful of Dutchmen here in West Michigan, you would think now, how in the world can that work cross-culturally? Why is that?
I think the needs are the same. I think it doesn't really matter the culture you're at. We have CBIs in Puerto Rico, Colombia, Ecuador, Guatemala, Nicaragua, and no matter where you go, the spiritual needs are going to be the same. These people still need to hear about the love of Christ. They still need to be forgiven for their sins. So it's the same message across the board.
So in Latin America, people in prison have the same needs, spiritual needs, as people in prison here. Where are we at in Africa? And is that the same thing in Africa? What countries are we there? Just name a few of them.
Well, a lot of the countries that we're currently in, South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Malawi, to name a few.
And there's some emerging.
Yeah, and some emerging along the way also. It's building off Sandra's piece here. It's a part of that universal spirituality where I think we desire to learn more about Christ and about his teaching, both through the Bible but also in extra resources. And these lessons are extra resources to help individuals learn more about the Bible, whether that's through another director face-to-face, whether that's through these lessons and reading through them, or whether that's talking out loud with another inmate in these prisons. And that's the beauty of these lessons, is they go so well with wanting to learn more about our faith, about how to interact in a community, how to interact with other people, both while inside a prison but also after you've been released.
Yeah. And I want to take this a step further for our viewers because, I'm sure they're with us this far because in our first tier, those first two courses, the one is the great truths of the Bible, so that we teach them, what's the meaning of the doctrine of grace and sin and salvation and sanctification and justification and all those things. And then in the second course, it's a survey of the Bible, so they're learning how to read Scripture from Genesis to Revelation as the unfolding of the history of redemption focused on the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. But now we've just begun to roll out a new Tier 2 program. And these Tier 2 courses are really focusing on what we've learned here in the States to be the areas of great need, the areas where people messed up, but that's why they're in prison, and areas that they need help on the outside. And that is the Christian work ethic course, overcoming addictions, Christian stewardship with finances, the Christian family, and then also giving back to community. Now that's just begun to roll out in the last several months. What are your satellite campuses saying about those 5 things? Are we hitting 5 areas that are only relevant to Americans?
Well, I don't know because I have to still translate,
but they've heard about them.
They've heard about it. I talked to Byron in Guatemala about it, and I think they are very excited.
I mean, those 5 areas resonate with them too.
Yes, for sure. And I think they're going to find it very useful once it's completed because it applies, like the first 2 courses, it applies very well to where the students are at.
Yes. And and how about from your end of the world?
While I may be new to the position, this new Tier 2 or this working through
life
these
skills programs, we call it.
Yes, through these life skills program, that is where much excitement has come from directors. especially in emails, when you're corresponding about, well, what would this entail? And you get to describe how it pertains to specifically worth ethics, money, the 5 pieces that we listed earlier. They are very encouraged and excited to see how this will directly affect their students. And we've already actually sent the first course, All Work is God's Work, to New Zealand, and they are starting to work through it. Already we're going to see very quickly here.
Well, what's so interesting
good
about it, I
pieces
find,
coming.
not only we have found that, that discipleship needs to take place everywhere, and so, it makes sense, I guess, then that the gospel is transcultural, but also the actual discipleship, the actual teaching them how to apply the gospel in their everyday lives also seems to be the same. Another thing, before I get into another subject too, our program, it takes time, and as we translate, our current English program is like over 10 years if a student sticks with us, and as we are translating more and more, those programs are going to extend. Now that's a distinctive of Crossroad Bible Institute. I mean, we don't, it's wonderful that evangelistic ministries go in, and even, in the satellite campuses to go in there and have a rally. We have had people who go there and have a rally in the prison, but they need more than a decision for Christ, correct? And has that been your experience, that they sense that? Because the Bible says in Matthew 28, Jesus says, make disciples, teaching them everything I have commanded you. And that's not done with a walk to the front of the rally.
Right. Yes, I
and
think
they get that?
Yeah, I think they do. And, it goes back to the postal system, well, it can happen here in Puerto Rico and Ecuador and, the other Latin American countries, except a little bit with Colombia, the directors actually go in the prisons and
they'll have a rally.
And have a rally every week.
But now they have something to follow it up rather than
Right.
just send it back to their cells with a
Yes.
decision for Christ.
Yes, and so sometimes they go through the lessons with the students and
Yep.
they pray over them.
Yeah.
So there is a mentor-mentee relationship with the students.
And I think there's also something that can be said about indigenous directors who present themselves. What I was just reading through a piece in Zambia where the United States, a specific church, sends a group down to Zambia to this prison. And it's very unique in that this is a continual trip or a continual ministry that happens every 6 months. Whereas our program, what I think really helps develop these prisoners, build a relationship with them, is that we have indigenous or strive to have indigenous directors who are ever present and
understand them and their culture.
Very much so, rather than
thanks.
6-month stints.
Yes, you're onto a very specific principle that we have with Latin America, with the rest of the world. From the beginning, we have said we need to not be sending Americans over there and having them live there and do the ministry for them, because I think mission agencies. This is the cutting edge, because many mission agencies found that when they send an American there to do more than temporary training or encouragement, the Americans end up doing all the work, and the indigenous people sit there and watch, and scholars have said that creates weak, entitlement attitude, dependent sort of ministries. We don't send money to any of our things. We actually expect reimbursement from Western countries eventually for the materials, but we don't expect that from the developing world. But we want an indigenous director, and we want an indigenous instructors, and we want to empower them, not do it for them. So that's an extremely important principle. Before we close, we've been talking about what this does for the prisoners, but how about, let's talk about the church all around the world that you guys are in contact with. What is this doing for the church? What is this doing for Christians? What do you hear?
I've been talking to Byron again in Guatemala and just Angel Aguirre in Ecuador, and they many of the instructors go to the churches, like in the United States, and they just love to correct the lessons because it helps them grow in their faith.
Yeah.
And just to have the relationship with the student that they see every week sometimes, it's just very different. They grow as Christians, and at the same time, they're helping somebody else.
Have you had any sense of that yet in Africa or Asia?
Very much so.
That the church is benefiting, not simply the people in prison.
Correct. In many cases, we see the church as a whole helping grade or instruct some of these students by going through their lessons. While the church as a whole doesn't necessarily go to these prisons, oftentimes the chaplains are able to
Distribute the lessons.
distribute the lessons back to a church, and now the church can get involved and thus help expand our ministry even further.
Right.
Wherever that may be.
So it's we're finding that all around the world, Crossroad is having the same transformational effect, not only on the people in prison, but also on the people who are serving them. And one of the most common things that I hear from instructors as I travel around is they say, Dr. Scheringa, I feel guilty about being a CBI instructor. And I said, well, why do you feel guilty? He says, because I think I'm getting more out of this than my students. and it is true. It is such a blessing, and that's what we're on this earth for. And I just feel just so thankful to God that we just have this global, circle, this global multitude of people who are growing in their faith as they're helping the least of these. And of course, it shouldn't be any surprise to us that they're growing in their faith, because Jesus says, whatsoever you do unto the least of these brothers of mine, you've done it unto me. Well, if you meet Jesus, I think you're going to get blessed.
Amen.
Whether it's Spanish or Mandarin or English, you're going to get blessed. And so, well, there's a whole lot of other stuff we could talk about, but we have to bring this to a close today. Especially like the social justice issues we have things that we're dealing with in this country that are very important to us, but things are even worse in the developing world, where many of our students are in prison and have no idea why they're there and have never had charges brought against them. The prison conditions are awful. And I always tell people that, our system is not perfect, and we're working to get it better. But if you have to go to prison, make sure you're in America. You don't want to be in prison where some of our other students are. Jacob, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your work, Sandra. You guys are. It's really interesting, because when I first started the international thing and talked about it, people said, "Wow, what do we need to do that for? We got enough prisoners here." But now people say, "Wow, this is great," And we can't do it without the church. We can't do it without you. So thank you. Get involved. Become an instructor. Learn all about us on the web at cbi.tv. Thanks for being with us. My name is David Scheringa, and we hope to see you again right here next week.